Whatever sector of the road transport industry you operate in, health and safety should be at the very heart of your business, ensuring that everyone is working in a safe and secure environment. Although the industry continues to make constant improvements in this area, there are still worrying reports of loose or detached wheels on heavy goods vehicles that lead to serious accidents on our roads. According to the latest data from the Transport Research Laboratory, on average there are around 9,250 wheel fixing defects found on commercial vehicles every year in the UK alone, including some 275 complete wheel detachments. Now, while these incidents aren't widely reported in the media, lost HGV wheels continue to change the lives of over 100 people in this country through damages, severe injuries, and in some cases even death. What's more, if your vehicle does suffer from a detached wheel, your operator's licence could be at serious risk. That's why you need to stay on top of wheel fixing procedures and get it right each time, every time. During the course of this training video, we'll be showing you how to safely remove, service and remount a wheel on a truck, trailer, coach or bus. And remember, if at any time during this training video there's something you don't understand, stop and ask your supervisor for further explanation, because you cannot have learning without understanding. It's important to ensure that when a vehicle's booked in for a wheel removal, that everyone knows the correct procedures. That means parking it in a safe environment and above all else ensuring there's clear signage showing it's not to be taken out onto the road under any circumstance. It also means informing your site personnel in the traffic office and via the driver's notice board that the truck is not in service. When mounting or removing the wheel, be sure you follow all the standard working practices. For example, the initial lifting of the vehicle must be carried out using the correct jacking procedures. That means ensuring it's on a level hard standing surface with the park brake on and using a suitable jack with the correct load capacity. And if you've never removed or remounted a commercial vehicle wheel before, you must be properly trained to do it by a qualified tyre technician before starting the work. First of all, before unbolting the wheel, make sure you clean the exposed threads of the studs with a wire brush or lightly lubricate them. Next, visually inspect the wheel assembly and check for any evidence that it may have been operating in a loose condition. If there are signs that a tyre has substantially deflated or has stood in a deflated condition for some time, the tyre or wheel components might have become damaged or displaced. If that's the case, remove the wheel assembly from the vehicle and the tyre from the wheel. Obviously, you'll need to examine the tyre to see why it's deflated and whether it's suitable for further service. And remember, each component part of the wheel must also be examined and replaced as necessary before being reassembled. Now, in the case of aluminium alloy wheels, excessive heat from either a fire or a brake malfunction or a wheel bearing failure or a tyre failure or indeed any other cause could weaken the metal and render the wheel unserviceable. So if you do suspect an alloy wheel has been damaged by excessive heat, it must be removed from service immediately. Now it's time to make sure that any other loose debris around the wheel is removed, again using a wire brush. And if wheel nut indicators are fitted, check to make sure they're in the correct position. If they're pointing the wrong way, that could well be early signs of a potential defect, so you need to be vigilant for any abnormalities. If the wheel is cracked or damaged, remember to deflate the tyre before attempting to remove the wheel. And should it be difficult to remove a wheel from the hub or drum, under no circumstances whatsoever, ever hit the wheel rim directly with a heavy hammer. To remove a wheel, you should always use the suitable tools designed for the job. And if those tools aren't available, a protective wooden block and a soft-faced mallet may be used, but only with caution. Once the wheel has been lifted off the ground, unbolt the wheel nuts with the air gun, making sure to follow all standard working practices and keeping the wheel nuts in a safe and secure environment so you can inspect them later. If you do experience any excessive tightness or difficulty in removing the nuts, this could also indicate a potential wheel security issue. Next, carefully remove the wheel from the hub assembly in line with manual handling procedures, taking extra care not to damage the stud threads on removing the wheel, whether it's a single or twin wheel assembly. So use levers or a cradle to lift and pull the wheels squarely off the hub. Finally, take the wheel away from the vehicle and fully deflate the tyre before carefully removing it from the wheel so it can be serviced and inspected. Now that you've removed the wheel, you need to ensure it's safe and serviceable and that you've thoroughly checked it for any defects. And remember, any signs of damage or wheel deterioration, no matter how small, should be reported to the customer's maintenance supervisor. When inspecting the wheel, look for any signs of corrosion or pitting and removing any light rust with a wire brush. If there's still any heavy pitting or corrosion after you've cleaned it, withdraw the wheel from service immediately and report it to the customer. Also, check for excessive wear around the centre bore of the wheel. Any significant wear in this area should also prompt the wheel's removal from service. And don't forget to closely inspect the wheel for any cracks or dents or wheel distortion too. And regardless of whether the damage is large or small, it won't be fit for further use in operation and the wheel should be taken out of service immediately. Once again, report this to the customer for further action. However, if the wheel is undamaged and safe for operational use, a tyre can be refitted to it. But if you do find any defects, you must remove the wheel from service immediately and make sure it's not reused in any capacity whatsoever. Finally, remember that the replacement wheel should always be to the same wheel fixing type of the original, and pay attention to any further customer specific policy that could be in place. Now that we know the wheel is operational, we can check the wheel hub. Firstly, inspect for any signs of worn spigots. This will be indicated by the wheel not centering correctly, which will cause an imbalance of the wheel, in turn vibration, resulting in loosening of the wheel itself. The spigots should also be free from loose material, corrosion, or any damaging defects. Use a wire brush to remove the debris from all the areas of the wheel hub, but especially around the spigots and the mating faces, which should be spotlessly clean. If there is corrosion that can't be removed, or if there's any other damage, you must report it to the customer immediately and have the vehicle removed from service. If you're still not sure, contact the site, as it's better to have a vehicle parked up safely for further inspection than to have it involved in an avoidable accident out on the road. You should now clean the wheel studs thoroughly and inspect them for any damage, for example, distortion, elongation, cracking or excessive wear to ensure they are reusable. And if they have been damaged, remove the vehicle from service and fit new wheel studs. Once again, make sure the customer knows that they're being replaced and that you've obtained a defect number. Also, check the washer element of the nut. These need to be free moving and show no signs of cracks, corrosion or seizing. Also check the nut itself to ensure it's free from debris around the threads and that there are no signs of any damage. Remember, it's important that the nut should be able to move freely over the entire length of the stud when tightening by hand. And if you do need to replace the wheel nut, only use those that meet the original material specification. If you find any of these defects on a wheel or its component parts, you must contact the fleet manager. More importantly, if you're ever unsure about a wheel's condition, contact a fleet manager, because it's better to act on a problem now than leave it to develop into something more serious later. Finally, if all the component parts have either been correctly serviced or replaced, you can now begin remounting the wheel back onto the hub. Remember, before remounting the wheel assembly, ensure all the areas around the wheel and hub are thoroughly cleaned to ensure the mating faces on the wheel nave and the wheel hub are free from debris, as dirt or rust could end up between the mating surfaces and prevent sufficient clamping forces when the wheel nuts are tightened. Also, we need to make sure that the threads on the studs can reconnect. To check this, apply a recommended amount of lubricant to the end of the threads on the studs and nuts, unless otherwise instructed by the vehicle manufacturer, whilst making sure you don't lubricate the face of the hub or the wheel. In other words, lubrication should only be applied to the nuts and the studs. Once again, if any components are found to be damaged or unserviceable, replace them accordingly and obtain a defect number. Now, carefully refit the wheel to the hub, taking care not to damage the wheel studs and threads, and making sure the valve access is aligned if twin wheels are fitted. Make sure also that you follow all standard working practices when doing this. Refit the wheel nuts manually over the full length of the stud, and if any excessive tightness is encountered during this process, then the stud and nut must be considered unserviceable and they should be replaced. And if an air tool is used, it's advisory to have it at the lowest setting. Above all else, never use an air tool for the final tightening. Once the wheel assembly has been remounted on the hub and ensuring there's no damage to the studs, either hand turn the nuts onto the studs or use an appropriate wheel brace. And once the wheel assembly is secured on the hub, torque the nuts using a properly calibrated torque wrench, tightening the wheel nuts in the correct sequence. This tightening should occur before you lower the vehicle back to the ground. And remember, never be tempted to over-tighten as this will stretch the stud. On HGVs, after the initial wheel tightening has been completed, it's possible there could be what's called settlement in the studs. That's a relaxation of the clamping forces on the wheel. Therefore, it's vital that you repeat the torquing procedure after leaving the vehicle to stand for at least 30 minutes or after it's travelled for a distance of between 40 to 80 kilometres, 25 to 50 miles. Again, only use your calibrated torque wrench and not extensions or wheel nut spanners and spiders. And again, the correct nut sequence must also be applied. But above all else, under no circumstances whatsoever should wheel nuts be slackened off and then retightened during the retorque process. Finally, after retorquing has been completed, refit the wheel nut indicators if required, making sure they point to the correct position. Then it's time to return all your equipment to storage, reduce the torque wrench setting to 0, and finally, remove any working signage, complete the appropriate paperwork, and make sure that appropriate copies are given to the relevant parties. The truck is now operational once more and it's safe to go back on the road. But always remember, routine in-service checks should take place afterwards and all wheel fixings rechecked for tightness in accordance with the operator's and the vehicle manufacturer's preventive maintenance schedule. So there you have it, the complete process of removing, inspecting, servicing and refitting a wheel. And now you have the knowledge to make sure the vehicles you service are not only safe for those driving them, but also for those sharing the road with them. And to finish, here are some of the key points to remember. Jack up the vehicle correctly and carefully, and remove the wheel from the wheel hub, placing all the nuts and studs in a safe environment so you can inspect them later. Remove the tyre from the wheel, making sure to follow all standard working practices and check for any defects, corrosion, cracks, dents or anything else you find of concern. And if you do find any defect, take the wheel out of service immediately. Clean all the parts thoroughly to remove any loose debris and lubricate the nuts and threads. Make sure the wheel nuts are usable by twisting them onto the wheel fixture by hand until you see the top of the head. However, make sure you check your customer's policy as it may vary. Make sure you don't lubricate the wheel hub face or any other parts of the wheel. Fit the wheel back onto the wheel hub, carefully following all standard working practices, and torque the wheel nuts to the correct setting. Then, lower the vehicle and let it stand for at least 30 minutes, or after it's travelled a distance between 40 and 80 kilometres, 25 to 50 miles, before retorquing. This will ensure the clamping forces are properly maintained. Finally, if you're ever unsure about anything regarding wheel fittings and fixings, contact the fleet manager or a qualified tyre technician and talk things through. It's always better to be certain than unsure. Thank you for watching, and remember, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, safety first. All done, Phil?
All done.
Great job, let's go.